Erin Patterson was named as a suspect
following a deadly mushroom dish.
The woman who cooked the lethal lunch.
How he managed his miraculous recovery after ingesting death cap mushrooms.
Since triple murderer Erin Patterson was found guilty.
The last name is Patterson.
Erin Patterson.
Erin Patterson.
Erin Patterson.
Erin Patterson.
And I can't believe that this has happened, and I'm so sorry.
I'm Suruti.
I'm Hannah.
And welcome to Red Handed, where, if you don't know, this entire episode, and part 2 of this, because yes, it is going to be a 2-parter, are being fully video recorded.
Aren't you lucky? Look at us doing what we're told.
I know. We're really trying to embrace this whole video-first podcasting situation. So this episode and next week's just felt like they warranted video facial reactions. And one more plug before we get started, because if you are listening to this the week of release, as you should be, then last Monday the 14th of July, was the release date, general release date, of our brand new limited series, Flesh and Code. It's great. That should be enough for you.
So if you don't know about Flesh and Code, it's about AI and how it can steal your job and your wife. The day it was released on Wondery Plus, my friend got made redundant because of AI.
I know. And if you're like, I don't care about AI stealing people's jobs, don't worry. That's very, 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 very barely brought up. The main thing is stealing your wife.
That's not what Flesh and Code is about.
Yes.
But it's very difficult.
Yeah. To be like, hey, listen to this.
Yeah.
So if that hasn't happened to you, then go listen to Flesh and Code, because it is basically Hannah and I, over the course of 6 episodes and 2 bonus episodes, exploring how AI, human, sexual, romantic relationships are blossoming.
Exactly. And how we, even though we shouldn't, we can't help ourselves trying to
fuck everything,
yeah. And also trying to solve unsolvable human problems with technology.
Right, absolutely. And it is such a fascinating story. It centres around one man, Travis, and his relationship with an AI companion called Lily Rose. But we do branch off into lots of other people. We look at also the creator, the founder of the particular app that they use. And there's all sorts of crazy stuff. Like, I mean, we're talking like Russian propaganda shenanigans, the ethics of all of this, attempted assassinations of the late Queen of England. There's lots going on. So go and check out Flesh and Code wherever you listen to your podcasts. And we'll be there.
We will be there. But right now, we're not going to talk about robots. We're going to talk about mushrooms.
Finally. Finally. This has been bubbling away inside of me for quite some time. And I am ready to let loose. Let's get on with it. On the 29th of July 2023, in the small town of Leongatha in the Latrobe Valley, around 80 miles southeast of Melbourne, a family gathered for lunch. Steaming hot plates of beef wellington, creamy mash and buttery green beans were piled up and passed around as the group got settled in. But by the following morning, most of the guests would be violently ill. And just a week later, 3 of the party would be dead and 1 would be left fighting for his life. And by the end of the year, the hostess with the mostess, Erin Patterson, would be arrested on suspicion of murder. The question for everyone was, what had happened? Was Erin Patterson the most ordinary-seeming, middle-aged mother of 2 you could possibly ever imagine? A cold-blooded killer? Or was it, as she claimed, an honest mistake caused by contaminated ingredients? But if so, then why did Erin lie again and again and again to authorities? It's the case that rocked Australia and made headlines all over the world. It's an almost medieval or Shakespearean story of family destruction. And although we did cover this story at least a year ago now over on Patreon, the Australian legal system, being very similar to the UK's, meant that there wasn't much room for speculation on our part. I know, it's so
How
gross.
do you feel about that?
I hate myself, but also, I was going to do it. So now, on what is very nearly, actually, the 2-year anniversary of this nightmare lunch, now that the whopping 10-week trial is finally over. And spoilers, Erin Patterson has been found guilty on 3 counts of murder and 1 of attempted murder. We decided it was time for a full blow-by-blow of exactly what went on around that table and kind of why.
And I left my laptop at home because I'm a stupid idiot. So I'm reading off my phone. I do apologise. In 2023, 48-year-old Erin Patterson was having a rough year. Her relationship with her estranged husband Simon had progressively become worse, and now she was having some serious health concerns. So, Erin had decided to invite Simon, his parents, her in-laws, Don and Gail, and Gail's sister Heather and Heather's husband Ian Wilkinson over for lunch. According to the Pattersons and the Wilkinsons, Erin had told them that she'd recently received some bad medical news and she needed help with how she was going to break it to her and Simon's 2 kids. They all assumed the worst, since the month before Erin had told them that she'd found a lump on her elbow. She said that she'd had a biopsy and an MRI, and she was just waiting for the results. But the night before the lunch, Simon texted Erin saying that he felt uncomfortable coming over, and he did follow up with a message stating that he would be more than happy to have a phone call with her to discuss her health issues.
And Erin, on receiving this message, was not happy. She replied telling Simon that she'd worked extremely hard preparing this lunch.
To be fair, I believe I made this point when we did the Patreon episode. Wellingtons are very, very difficult.
I believe you. Not the way I think Erin made them, which we will come on to, but I absolutely take your point that a beef Wellington is a dish that you make to really show those people that they are special.
Oh yeah, like if you pull off a Wellington.
Mm-hmm. But I would say what she actually made are more like pasties, but we'll get there, I promise.
Did she make her own pastry?
I don't know. That is a question I actually don't know the answer to.
Because if she did, I'm impressed.
I don't know if she made that, but again, hold on to your hats on the Wellington front, because this is what Erin texted Simon back. She said she spent a fortune on ribeye steaks, which she was going to use to make beef Wellingtons to make the lunch special. I know. Hannah, you included, and anybody listening, watching at home is going to be like, what the fuck are you on about ribeye steaks if you're making a Wellington? I promise you I will get to it.
The marbling's all wrong for a start.
So she also explained in this text message to Simon that she was not happy that he was deciding not to come because she might not be able to do something like this again for quite some time, given her recent news. And Erin reiterated in these text messages to her estranged husband Simon that it was very important that they all attend the lunch the next day. But Simon still didn't show up. Erin, however, was not going to let that ruin her party. When the rest of the group arrived, as planned at 12:30, Erin showed them around the house because Ian and Heather, Simon's aunt and uncle, had actually never been to the house before. So she shows them around, and then she served up lunch.
So the group grabbed their food, dished up by Erin, and then they all tucked in. Ian, Heather, and Don all cleared their plates. Gail only managed to eat about half of her Wellington, but her husband, Don, was very happy to help her out. The group then finished off with some orange cake that Gail had brought with her, and a fruit platter courtesy of Heather. Then, according to Ian Wilkinson, Erin told them all that she had ovarian cancer and she needed surgery and then chemotherapy. Obviously, it was incredibly worrying news, but Don, Gail, Heather and Ian all assured Erin that they would do whatever they could to help her and support her through this. Together, they also prayed for Erin. Ian is, after all, the local pastor. And they advised Erin to just be honest with her children. The conversation was cut short when Erin's son came home with a friend. He chatted to the guests for a bit before teenagerly running off to his room to play video games.
After the lunch, everybody left in pretty good spirits, despite the sad news. But by midnight, things had taken a turn. All 4 of the guests were sick, struggling with intense diarrhea and vomiting. Simon got a call from his father Don the following morning at 8:45. Don told his son that he and Gail were having a really bad time and that he'd actually called an ambulance. According to Don, Ian and Heather were ill too. So Simon drove to his aunt and uncle's house to check on them. And it was immediately clear to Simon that they both needed urgent medical attention. So he quickly bundled them into his car and drove Ian and Heather straight to Leongatha Hospital. On the way, Simon's aunt Heather asked him why Erin had eaten her lunch off a different colour plate to the ones they had. Did she have a shortage of crockery? To which Simon, probably at the time, putting this strange question down to his aunt being dehydrated and confused because she's, been sick all night, simply replied, yes, maybe.
It is an odd thing to notice.
Yeah. We'll come back to it because it's not the only time that Heather brings this up.
Initially, the suspicion at the hospital was that the 4 unfortunate patients had been victims of food poisoning. Beef, perhaps. It's quite difficult to get food poisoned by beef. It's not like chicken.
It's complicated because it's like, what could it be? And I think they're just like, it's got to be food poisoning because they all ate the same thing.
Sure.
And that makes the most sense. Whatever it is that's causing it is a question mark.
Mm-hmm.
But food poisoning seems the best bet because it's what they all did together that day.
But as the doctors watched, Ian, Gail, Don and Heather rapidly deteriorated. We're talking acute liver failure and multiple organs shutting down within hours. So the doctors thought that it might have to be something a bit more than food poisoning. All 4 of them had eaten beef Wellingtons containing mushrooms. And the symptoms that they were exhibiting fit with something like death cap poisoning, which is pretty amazing work. That's like an episode of House.
Honestly, Dr. Chris Webster, who is going to become a big player in these 2 episodes, remarkable work. Honestly, for him to put his finger that quickly when he's being presented with 4 sick people, to identify that quickly death cap poisoning, remarkable.
And sure, like, the land down under does have a bit of a reputation for being entirely populated by things that are going to kill you. But death cap mushrooms are very rare in Australia. Mm-hmm. In the past 40 years, there have only been 6 known deaths. 5 humans, 1 spaniel. But even given that death cap poisoning is so rare in Australia, Dr. Chris Webster was convinced that that is what he was looking at. And he told the family that he needed to speak to whoever had cooked those Wellingtons as soon as possible. So Simon called Erin to tell her what was going on. He explained that everyone from the lunch had been hospitalised and asked her how she was doing. Erin said that she had had a bad tummy as well and that she was going to come into the hospital to get an IV.
During that call that Simon, Erin's estranged husband, makes to her, because he's at the hospital with his mum, his dad, his aunt and his uncle, he doesn't mention the mushroom theory, right? He just says, are you okay? Because everyone else is really sick. We're all in the Leongatha hospital here. Like, are you coming in? Are you okay? They kind of want to also check you out. They want to speak to you. And that's when she's like, oh yeah, I am going to come in. I need to get an IV. So when Erin arrives at the hospital, she's sat in the waiting room. And Dr. Webster, on hearing that she has arrived, rushes out into the waiting room to speak to her urgently. And he told Erin, apparently, that he had been waiting to speak to her. And according to Dr. Chris Webster, she seemed visibly shocked and uncomfortable when he said that to her. And she told him, I'm just a gastro case. It's nothing urgent. It's no big deal. The doctor then questioned her on how she was feeling and on where she got the mushrooms for the lunch from. He specifically says that to her. And Dr. Chris Webster stressed to Erin Patterson that if this was indeed death cap poisoning, the situation was incredibly time sensitive. On hearing this, Erin got the fuck out of there as fast as she humanly could. And soon after Erin legged it, Dr. Chris Webster made the following call to 000.
Hello, what address do you need the police? So, this is Dr. Chris Webster calling from Leongatha Hospital, and I have a concern regarding a patient that presented here earlier but has left the building and is potentially exposed to a fatal toxin from mushroom poisoning. And I've tried several times to get hold of her on her mobile phone.
So, before I get all that information in, what address do you need the police to attend, Dr. Chris?
Yeah, so, well, should I give the hospital address or the address of the patient?
If you know where they are, their address.
I have the address of the patient.
Yeah, go ahead with that. When did she present at hospital?
At 8:05
Today?
Yeah.
Mushroom poisoning, you said?
Yeah, so there were 5 people that ate a meal on Saturday, and 2 of them are in intensive care at Dandenong Hospital. 2 have just been transferred from Leongatha Hospital to Dandenong Hospital, and Erin presented this morning with symptoms of poisoning.
When she presented, she just got up and left?
No, there was time for the nurse to begin observations, and I was managing the other critically unwell patient, so I had a brief chat to her about where the mushrooms were obtained, and after that, while I was attending the other patients, the nurse informed me that she had discharged herself against medical advice.
So yeah, I think that call is very, very important because it paints a picture of the real urgency that the doctors had at the time. And I think you can tell in that call that Chris Webster is saying that he found Erin's behaviour to be strange, to be unusual. Why has she discharged herself against medical advice when the nurses started observations after he asked her where the mushrooms had come from? And why is she uncontactable when he told her, you're telling me you're sick, I'm telling you you may have been exposed to a deadly toxin that has currently put at least 2 people in intensive care and is eventually going to kill 3 of them. Why would you leave? And I think it shows that this didn't become something strange that doctors and nurses thought about in hindsight.
Mm-hmm.
At the time, her behaviour was strange.
Yeah.
And when you listen to that call, it feels like Erin, who had come into the hospital to seek medical attention, according to her, ran out pretty much as soon as doctors started questioning her on where the mushrooms had come from.
At no stage in that interaction, they're not accusing her of anything.
No, they're just asking.
Hasn't even crossed their mind. They're like, oh, actually, you could be really ill and we need to help you.
Absolutely. They are just on a mission to understand and save lives. That's what they're trying to do. And she comes in, again, I can't stress this enough, she comes into the hospital voluntarily saying she needs an IV because she says, I have been sick and having diarrhea all night. But as soon as they say, where did the mushrooms come from, she checks herself out. You know, she wasn't tricked into coming to the hospital. She chose to come. So why did she leave before she could get the IV? So, yeah, just interesting things to think about. Because I really think what happened here is that Erin thought, okay, they're all in hospital. I'll go down there too. I'll put on a bit of an act of, being sick and make out that we've all had a touch of this food poisoning. And then, happy days. I do not think for 1 second she thought or expected Dr. Webster to start talking to her about mushrooms. I think it freaked her out completely when he says to her, where did you get these mushrooms? I think it completely freaked her out because I don't think she thought that anybody would be onto the true cause of these illnesses that quickly.
Yeah, I agree. Erin had told the nurses that she needed to leave, saying that she had to go home to feed her animals and pack a ballet bag for her daughter. And okay. You've just been told by doctors that you may have been exposed to a deadly toxin. And apparently, according to you, you don't feel very well. Why would you leave?
That's one of the biggest questions. She says she is ill. And they're like, we think you've been poisoned with death cap mushrooms. And she's like,
but the ballet bag.
I have to go. I have to leave.
And there's even CCTV footage that we've seen since the trial of just how forceful Erin's exit was from the hospital. Erin is stood by the door looking visibly quite agitated.
Mm-hmm.
And there's a nurse trying to speak to her and also sort of trying to block her path. The nurse even reaches out to try and touch Erin on the arm, clearly trying to convince her to stay, but Erin is just not having it. shaking her head and pushing the release door button.
She just looks so standoffish. She's just like, nope, don't touch me. Don't want to be here. I want to get out of here. And she's like pressing that release door button. She's looking for any way to get out. She looks like a cornered animal, like someone who just wants to be anywhere except in this hospital. And I cannot imagine having that feeling if I had just been told that the reason I might be feeling sick is because I've been exposed to poison and the doctors and nurses are trying to help me.
Yeah.
So yeah, in the CCTV footage, and this is, I just love this bit because this is like internet sleuthing at its best. I mean, it's barely sleuthing, internet observations at its best. Because for some reason, this is never brought up at trial, but everybody talks about it on the internet, and it is such a good point. Erin is in the CCTV footage wearing white trousers. Come on. You are going to tell me, lady, that you have been up all night with diarrhea, you've been vomiting, your stomach is, all over the place, ill enough that you need to come to hospital to get an IV. And she says to Dr. Chris Webster when she's in the waiting room, I'm just a gastro case. What sort of fucking gastro case walks around wearing white trousers? Could you imagine such a thing?
No.
She's not on her period and it's not a bloody Tampax ad. I do not believe it for a second. It is unimaginable that would be the case.
It's kind of like a weird inverse of like when you're a kid and your mum's like, well, you have to put clean pants on because if you get hit by a bus and you've got dirty knickers on, that'll be really embarrassing.
Yeah.
Which I think is just such an odd thing to say to children.
I know.
Like, the only reason to keep up your personal hygiene is if you die.
And someone judges you from
from
the coroner's slab. But no, it reminds me of that line from The Thick of It when Malcolm Tucker is like screaming at the MPs and he's like, and come in, like they've done something terrible and he's like, and come in tomorrow wearing brown coloured trousers and a blood red top because I'm going to eviscerate you. And it's like this woman has chosen to do quite the exact opposite. So yeah, she's apparently, been sick all night and had diarrhea all morning. A morning in which, by the way, we would later discover that she had taken her son on a 140-kilometre round-trip drive so that he could go to a flying lesson that he had booked in. And she had done that again whilst being very unwell, whilst having diarrhea, and again whilst wearing those same white trousers. The baffled nurses realise they can't keep Erin there against her will. They try their best, as you can see in that CCTV footage, but they can't like strap her to a bed.
Well, they can't like section her for having the shits,
Exactly. So they make it clear to Erin, okay, you can leave. But they said to her, you need to be back within 40 minutes. Because they told her, you have almost certainly been exposed to a deadly toxin. And they said she needed to be tested, she needed to be monitored, and she needed to be given something to protect her liver, which is where they were seeing the acute failure in the other 4 patients. But Erin wouldn't come back to the hospital for nearly 2 hours. When she did come back, she claimed that she was so late because she'd gone home and fallen asleep.
Mm-hmm.
And now that she was back, she told medical staff, oh, I actually feel fine. I actually feel right as rain.
The magic of a nap.
So yeah, quite. Maybe I've been poisoned by death caps like everybody else seems to have been, but I went home, had a little nap, and now I'm fine.
Yeah,
so don't worry
they're
about
actually
it.
been quite dramatic. Erin also dropped the bombshell that she'd given her children the leftovers from the previous day's lunch, and they were completely fine.
Just like she is.
The doctors were shocked, and they told Erin in no uncertain terms that she needed to get her children and bring them to the hospital now. But Erin was reluctant. She said that her kids hadn't eaten the mushroom paste because they didn't like mushrooms. So she'd scraped the duxelle and the pastry off and just given her kids the beef and the beans and the mash. So there was no need for the children to come to the hospital and scare them for no reason. And the doctor said, do you want scared kids or dead ones?
Mm-hmm. Chris Webster's not fucking about.
No. So Erin had no choice. And thankfully, the tests on the 2 children and Erin all showed that they were fine. They had normal everything. Normal blood pressure, normal bloods, normal livers, normal pulses, normal temperatures. Absolutely everything was fine. So all 3 of them were discharged.
And this, again, I think is very, very interesting. Firstly, can I just say, who eats a meal, gets sick with suspected food poisoning? Because that's, remember, what Erin herself claims.
Mm-hmm.
She says they eat the meal on Saturday and then she is not feeling well all of Saturday night and Sunday morning. Who then gives that same meal to their children? Because you don't know what's causing the food poisoning, but it must be something in that meal if that's the last thing you ate and then you got sick. Why would you give that same meal to your kids? Surely, I take your point that like it's quite hard to get food poisoning from beef, but surely if it were me, then the most likely culprit from that Saturday afternoon meal would have been the meat. That's what I would have thought. I would have thought, I've got some bad meat, maybe the fridge didn't work, maybe there's something in it, mad cow disease, I don't know. Something has caused us to get sick. It's probably not the potatoes. It's probably not the fucking beans. You know, the pastry, and, you know, it's just some fucking duxelles. Like, you're going to think it's the meat. That's going to be the most likely scenario. Yet, when the doctors asked Erin to bring the kids in, she says she wasn't worried about them because she'd scraped the mushrooms off the leftovers and given it to them. And yes, look, the doctors had said to Erin at this point that they were worried about mushroom poisoning, but they don't know that it is mushroom poisoning yet. Nobody knows that. That is just a theory. No tests have been done at this point to confirm that it was the mushrooms, that it was definitely death cap poisoning. So it still could have been the meat. It still could have been anything. And those kids had eaten everything apart from the pastry and the mushrooms. So as an innocent outside bystander who maybe doesn't know how beef food poisoning presents itself, I would still be convinced that it was the meat that was causing this problem. Yet Erin is so sure, despite the fact that nobody in that hospital really knows what's making everybody sick. She is willing to take that much of a risk with her kids and say they can't possibly need to come in because they didn't eat the mushrooms. How would you know that that's what's causing it? And what sort of mother would take such a risk?
Well, that's what I was going to say. Like, people are wicked dumb. Like that, I know that. I know that in my heart and my soul. I just am not convinced that anybody would see family members hospitalised after eating something and then give that same thing to their children. I just don't believe that.
The whole thing makes no sense. Even if you didn't know about the hospitalizations, the fact that you feel unwell after eating that meal makes it highly suspect to me that you would feed it to your children. And also the fact that those children have eaten essentially 4/6 of the same meal that has now hospitalized their grandparents. Why would you take the word of those doctors who are only saying we suspect mushroom poisoning to say, well, they're fine because they didn't eat the mushrooms? Because you don't fucking know it's not the beef. So, like, it just boggles my mind that she would have been so willing to take such a risk with her children, you know, if she didn't know that the problem was indeed the mushrooms and that she didn't actually feed her kids those fucking leftovers. The kids say they ate leftovers, but, like, she could have just bought more fucking steak and made them the same meal, going nowhere near the duxelles that were in the beef Wellington. Because her point is, I scraped it off and gave it to them. I don't believe that for a second.
No. The 4 other diners were getting significantly worse. Ian, Don, Heather and Gail weren't responding to treatment anymore, and they were rushed to urgent care at the Monash Medical Centre in Melbourne. Meanwhile, the doctors probed Erin further. They needed to know exactly what mushrooms she had used and where she had got them from. Erin told them that she'd made the duxelle for the Wellingtons from a mix of button, shiitake and dried porcini mushrooms. And she said that she'd got the fresh ones from a Woolies and the dried ones from an Asian supermarket. With the Pattersons and the Wilkinsons now in a critical condition and mushroom poisoning high on the list of concerns. At 5:30 p.m. on the 31st of July, the doctors called Professor Rhonda Stewart, a director of infection prevention and epidemiology at Monash Health.
Pretty much as soon as she gets that call and they explain the situation to her, Professor Rhonda is terrified because she is scared that this is going to turn into a major public health risk. Because Erin is there claiming that she had bought these mushrooms, that she had purchased these mushrooms from a shop, from an Asian supermarket. So if there was a shop out there, wittingly or unwittingly, selling poisonous mushrooms to the public, this could well be just the start of some sort of large-scale catastrophe. So imagine Professor Rhonda's shock when she found Erin Patterson incredibly reluctant to talk to her. All Erin would really say to Professor Rhonda was that she had cooked the beef Wellingtons to make the meals special, and that she had followed a recipe from the cookbook Recipe Tin Eats by a chef called Nagi Mehashi, who is actually, fun fact, currently embroiled in another crimey case of her own, where she's accused another chef, a woman named Brooke Bellamy, of plagiarising her caramel slice and baklava recipes.
Serious business, man.
Serious business.
This just popped into my head, and I can't help myself. Did you know that jelly babies used to be called unclaimed babies?
Oh my God.
And they're like made in the image of like when people would like leave babies on the church steps.
That's fucked.
Isn't it just fucked?
That's hilarious also, though. Wow. Oh, God. So, yes, she tells Professor Rhonda all this kind of like seemingly like irrelevant information. And then she says that she had been so shocked when she'd heard that everyone had been hospitalised and that she had rushed her kids into the hospital to get them checked out since they'd eaten the leftovers. Conveniently leaving out the part, you know, where she'd actually been forced to bring her kids into the hospital by her husband Simon and the doctors.
When it came to the topic of the mushrooms, Erin said that she couldn't actually remember quite exactly where she'd bought the dried ones.
Yeah, she's just very vague, like, it was an Asian supermarket.
She said that it had been months since she had purchased the mystery mushrooms, and she got them originally for a carbonara, but thought they smelled a bit too strong.
Carbonara doesn't have mushrooms in.
Can do.
Can do. Okay.
Not dried ones, though.
There you go. Well.
Anyway, the mushrooms were from an Asian supermarket, but it could have been in Glen Waverley, Mount Waverley, Clayton, or in Oakley. Erin said that she drove around a lot during the summer holidays, taking the kids to various activities. So the mushrooms could have come from anywhere. She just couldn't remember. According to Erin, she also must have paid for the mushrooms in cash because, quite conveniently, she had no electronic proof of the payment for the dried mushrooms.
She's also immediately confusing her story here because she's giving all the names of these various suburbs, right? She's saying that she bought them months ago, but then she's also saying she drove around a lot that summer and that she has like a bolt hole house like in like another suburb. She says so it could have been while I was staying there. But if she'd bought them months ago, she didn't buy them in the summer. So she wouldn't have been driving the kids around to all of their various activities. Like nothing she's saying already makes any real sense.
And despite the fact that Erin couldn't remember anything about where the mushrooms had come from, she did give a very detailed description of what the bag looked like. She said it was a clear bag with a handwritten label and that it weighed 100 grams.
She doesn't have the bag anymore, to be clear.
Right.
She is recalling that from memory because, as we will go on to find out, she shut the bag away. Mushrooms not in the bag. So how do you remember the weight and the look of the bag, but you can't remember where you bought them? We'll come back to it.
During this initial conversation, Professor Rhonda also asked Erin if she'd been mushrooming, which I assume doesn't mean taking magic mushrooms.
Correct.
Is it foraging for them?
Good guess.
Okay.
I guess that anyone, I think, could make, but Erin would later claim she didn't know what she meant by that. But please continue.
My pleasure. Erin said that she hadn't been mushrooming. She'd never been mushrooming. Not once in her life.
It begs the question as well. Like I said, we will come back to the fact that she will later say when she's asked about this that she didn't know what mushrooming meant. Why wouldn't you ask then? Why would you say no? If you asked me, have you ever been mushrooming and I wasn't sure what that meant, I'd be like, what do you mean by that? Not, no?
And my family are dying.
Yeah. There's also that.
And Professor Rhonda was panicking at this point. She really needed to figure out which shop was selling the death mushrooms quite quickly. And that's not just like out of the goodness of her heart. Like, that's her job.
Yeah.
If people die, that's her fault.
Yes, absolutely. And here is a woman, here is a witness who could potentially tell her where these fucking mushrooms had come from. But she seems incredibly vague about the whole situation. So Professor Rhonda basically tells Erin to go home and have a think about where those mushrooms had come from. She even says to her, like, even if you can just narrow it down to a few particular streets where you maybe regularly go to Asian supermarkets, even if you can remember a landmark nearby the day that you were holding that bag of mushrooms that you vividly remember in your hand, even if you don't remember the name of the shop, give me something that will help us find out where it came from. And while Erin went home to think about it, an officer from public health had already hit the streets of the various suburbs that Erin had mentioned. This officer visited every single Asian and independent supermarket he could find and started documenting all of their dried mushroom selections. But none of them at all matched the description that Erin had given. He couldn't find anywhere a bag that was 100 grams. All of them are like 30 grams at most, like small bags of dried mushrooms, and none of them have like handwritten labels or anything like that. And so they just take a picture. He just takes a picture of all of the different bags that he finds, all of the different shop fronts that he visits, all of the different streets that he goes to. And these are sent to Erin in a hope that something might, lodge a memory loose for her. But she is incredibly, infuriatingly vague still, and just says that she doesn't recognize any of them. And that was when they could get her to talk at all. Because for the next few days, Erin failed to return multiple, increasingly urgent calls, texts, and voicemails from Professor Rhonda. And I read the transcripts of these calls, right? She is like, please, Erin, call me. Where did you get these mushrooms? Can you tell me what else was in the meal? You said there were shallots. Where did you get the shallots? So she's looking at every possibility, and she's repeatedly calling her and saying, this is urgent. And Erin doesn't go back to her, or if she does, she'll text her saying, sorry, busy with the kids, we'll get back to you tonight. Doesn't get back to her. Like, it's stonewalling.
All the while, Gail, Heather, Ian and Don were crashing. Doctors gave Don a liver transplant, but it didn't work. Gail was too ill for a transplant, and Heather already had major bowel and liver damage. During one of her lucid moments, Heather asked Simon again, why had Erin had a different colour plate to the rest of them? According to Heather, they'd all eaten off large grey plates, and Erin had used a small tan plate. Simon again said that he didn't know. Erin did have mismatched crockery. Maybe that was all she had for a group of 5. And we just don't know why this stood out to Heather so much that early on. Could it be that she noticed because Heather already suspected that something dodgy was going on? I have to say, I would notice that. Yeah,
but I would, but the fact that she asks twice.
Twice, yeah.
And because she is in hospital dying.
Yeah.
It screams to me that immediately, because she asks Simon that when he goes to get her from her house that morning. I'm like, why did she already think that something nefarious was going on? It's really weird. And we don't have the answer. We don't have the answer to that because Heather's dead. But like, yeah, I do not know why Heather already had doubts about this.
It also drives me absolutely up the wall when there were 5 of us until Dad died, lol. And it used to drive me absolutely nuts that placemats came in sets of 4. So there was always an odd one, and it drove me up the wall.
Yeah, plates, cutlery, lots of things come in like 4s. So I could understand, of course. You have people over, you've only got 4 matching plates. You take the small shit one because you want your guests to have the nice plates. And, you know, if 3 people hadn't died and one person spent like fucking months in a coma after, wouldn't think twice about it. I'm not a fucking snob. I'll eat off whatever plate you fucking give me, as long as it doesn't smell like eggs.
She will sniff it.
I will sniff it. Just rinse it in cold water before you give me utensils or plates, for the love of God. But yeah, I do not know why Heather was already suspicious. But sadly, we'll never know. So yeah, by this point, it had become pretty clear to the doctors that Gail, Don and Heather were not going to survive. And despite the doctors throwing everything at them, they all continued to deteriorate. 5 days after the lunch, sisters Gail and Heather both died on the 4th of August, followed the next day by Don. Ian Wilkinson was the only one still hanging on. He was put into a medically induced coma, and it would be 7 more weeks before he finally woke up, only to learn that he had had an incredibly lucky escape, but tragically, that his wife and his brother and sister-in-law were all dead. It's just so so like unbelievably heartbreaking. Like he spends 2 months in a coma, wakes up, and they're just like, yeah, your life is shattered. Your beloved wife of like 5 decades is dead.
Yeah.
And we still don't know exactly why.
I think I'd ask to be recombed.
It's just so sad. But one person who didn't seem all that genuinely heartbroken was Erin Patterson. Because soon after the deaths, Erin was questioned on the street outside her house by a journalist who just so happened to kind of get her at that right moment. And when you watch it, we are going to watch the video together. It's not very long, but in my opinion, it is very telling.
It's a tragedy what's happened.
Can you tell us about the meal that you cooked?
I'm so devastated by what's happened, by the loss of Don. Don is still in hospital. The loss of Ian and Heather and Gail. They were some of the best people that I've ever met. Gail was like...
Take your time.
Gail was the mum that I didn't have because my mum passed away 4 years ago. And Gail's never been anything but good and kind to me. And Ian and Heather were some of the best people I've ever met. They never did anything wrong to me, and I'm so devastated about what's happened.
Can you tell us
and the loss to the community and to the families and to my own children who've lost their grandmother.
Okay. Mm-hmm. Firstly, lots of eye rubbing.
Yeah, quite a dry face you've got there, Erin.
Yeah.
She even checks her own hand.
Yep.
To see if there's a tear on it. There isn't.
There isn't, because there's lots and lots of wiping, but absolutely no tears that I can see.
And maybe this is just me, but I don't know if you know, but I'm white. When I cry, I go bright red. Mm-hmm. Just normal colour, isn't she?
Yeah. I'd say so. Lots of things to point out. Firstly, absolutely. I think the visible, like, is she really crying? The lack of redness, the lack of tears. I think they are crucial. I just don't think they are things. I know we say all the time, like, nobody really knows how somebody's going to react when they're in a grief-stricken time. I stand by that.
I agree.
But she is not acting in a way that's like she's not crying and they were saying that's odd. She is pretending. This is a performance. That's what it seems like. And I also think, okay, look at her body language, right? The way her arms are down by her side, the way she's acting, the way she's standing. I'm sorry, if I'm crying, you're like curled in on yourself. You're trying to protect yourself. There's some self-hugging. There's some like self-protection. There's some like to turn yourself away, to hold yourself almost. She's standing almost like she's standing up there giving a performance, like she's singing a fucking tragic opera. Why are the arms by the side? Like that almost feels quite unusual to me.
And if you're standing like that and you are crying, you're not giving into it. You're trying as hard as you can for it not to be happening.
But that's inconsistent with her warbling.
Yeah.
And she kind of puts on, I feel like, this quite childlike voice when she's doing it. It's quite like, oh. It just doesn't, her body language, the way that her face is coming across, the lack of tears, but the voice she's making and the warbling, the kind of like, the like, what's the word? It's not like vocal fry, but you know when you're crying and your voice like shakes. Those are all there. She's doing the voice of how she thinks somebody sounds when they're crying, but it's not matching up with the physical appearance, I believe. So there's that. People can, refute that. You can say that kind of thing. People are different, and she is a weird person.
Yeah, and weird people are everywhere.
Sure,
I'm right here. I don't doubt that there is a world where an innocent person would do something like that.
Quite.
It's just not this one.
It's not this one. I also think it's quite interesting. Within the first minute of this interaction, it sounds to me like she's putting forward an alibi, right? She's immediately saying, they never did anything wrong to me. They were wonderful to me.
And also my mum died.
My mum died. Feel sorry for me. It's a lot. Me. It's all about her. There's so much that is about her. What she has lost, what her kids have lost. Again, it sounds like an alibi. It's like, why would I kill them? My kids have lost their loving grandparents. I loved Gail and Don. They were so good to me. They never did anything to me. Like, do you know what I mean? It feels like she's building this alibi against anybody who could suspect her. Why is that what you're saying, you know? I just don't feel the real empathy here for the victims.
No.
It feels like it's about her, which, even if you believe Erin's story, that all she did was cook this special meal for her loved ones and ended up killing them, why is there no more guilt and more empathy for these people who, even in your version of this, you killed? Only by accident. But if I accidentally killed 3 people, I would be talking about that. I wouldn't be talking about how they were so good to me and why I wouldn't have done it. Because
I wouldn't be talking at all.
No, quite. It's just, there's just so many weird things about this. And also, I do want to point this out because it fucking drives me mad. This is immediately after the deaths. She's getting the names wrong. She's saying Don is still in hospital. Ian, Heather and Gail have died. Ian is the one who's in the coma. Don is dead. Again, I would think if I killed 3 people and put one person in a coma, you'd sure as fuck think I would know who was still alive. I find that quite shocking. Let's continue, shall we? Because it's just gonna get interesting.
Can you tell us a bit more about the lunch?
What I can tell you is that I just can't fathom what has happened. I just can't fathom what has happened. That Ian and Heather have lost their lives, and Gail has lost her life, and Don is still in hospital, and I pray that he pulls through, because my children love him.
And you must be pretty shaken up by this as well.
I'm devastated. I love them. And I can't believe that this has happened, and I'm so sorry that they have lost their lives.
How are you
I
kids?
just can't believe it. Just can't believe it.
Can you tell us where the mushrooms came from? Were they picked from the property area?
I just ask you to leave me alone now, please.
Police say you're a suspect. Do you have anything to say about
Yes,
that?
I say I didn't do anything. I love them. And I'm devastated that they're gone. And I hope with every fibre of my being that Don pulls through. That's
Where
what I
do the
have to
mushrooms
say.
come from? Were they picked by you, or where did they come from, Erin? Can you tell us? What meal did you cook them? Did you eat the same meal, Erin?
Well, I don't think she'll be cast in any community theatre productions anytime soon.
Not even in
She can't look any of them in the eye. She's constantly like moving her gaze, which is what people do when they lie, by the way. And she can't look them in the eye.
And I feel like she's willing the tears to come. She's trying so desperately for the tears to come, but they won't come. And she's doing that like sobbing, which I'm just like, it sounds so unrealistic.
It sounds like what children do.
Yeah.
It's like when you punch your sister in the face and you realise that you've actually really hurt her.
Yeah.
And you're like, oh my God, please don't tell mum.
Yeah.
And then she, not from personal experience or anything, makes it way bigger than it has to be. It's that noise.
Yep. It's like
Yes, exactly. Yeah.
like it is really jarring to watch that. I think we've seen fake people crying. We've seen crocodile tears many a time on this show before. I would say she is one of the least successful at convincing anybody.
It is quite bad. I'm aware that this is reasonably rural Australia, right? That news crew, I think you just did a crime. Like, I just obviously she did it, like whatever, she's a bad person, but just sort of hanging outside her house, waiting for her to come home. Not on, I don't think. It's not like the McCanns doing a press conference and appealing for information.
Yeah.
They're just like waiting for her.
I know.
And I just think that's a bit weird. But slow news day, possibly.
I mean, this was the story.
Yeah.
So they were the ones to sort of get this I mean, can we call it an interview? I suppose, because she does stand there. She stands there and she talks to them. She does engage with them. And I think that this is one of those moments that we are going to see a lot over the course of this episode, and particularly next week's episode when we get into the trial, is how Erin Patterson, I believe, at her core, thinks that she is more intelligent than everybody else and can trick and convince and manipulate everybody with her words. Because, like the journalist there said to her, the police have named you as a suspect in this. Does she not have a lawyer yet? As we'll go on to find, she's a very wealthy woman, is Erin Patterson. I believe she would have a lawyer at this point. And I can't believe any lawyer would have given her the green light to talk to the press.
That's what I thought immediately.
That is going to just be an absolute ginormous nail in your coffin.
Nightmare.
That interview did not help her 1 ounce. I think she thought it would. I think she thought she probably came across incredibly convincing. But it is really, really awkward, cringeworthy and jarring to watch. And particularly the line where they say, "Can you tell us about the lunch?" And she just starts talking about other things. She doesn't want to talk about it. And then the bit where, they say, the police say you did it or something.
You're a suspect.
You're a suspect. And she says, "Well, I say I didn't do it." She doesn't say, "I didn't do it." And look, we can pick holes in innocent people who have given these sort of interviews and things that they have done that seem odd. But we have been gifted here with a woman who clearly fucking did it, and a perfect little microcosm of an interview that is just some of the very worst acting I've ever seen in the world of true crime.
Before we get to the police investigation and the aftermath of the deaths, we're going to talk about the victims themselves. 70-year-old Don and Gail Patterson, Simon's parents, have been married for 50 years.
I had to triple check that because I was like, is that right? Yeah.
50 years.
50 years.
When you get to 60 years in this country, you get a letter from the king. I think that's diamond, 60.
I think so. I can't remember. But yeah, 50 fucking years.
I literally will not live that long. There's no way. I could get married tomorrow.
Yep.
I will not be married for that long. Accepting applications. Don and Gail had 4 children, and Simon was the oldest one. And even though Simon and Erin had been separated, Don and Gail were really involved in their grandchildren's lives.
They just seem like the nicest, most lovely grandparents you could ever hope to have. They just seem like the sweetest people.
Retired school teacher Don was tutoring Simon and Erin's son in maths. And they'd often hang out at the weekends, carrying out little science experiments in the garden.
It's so cute.
That's cute.
There's this video footage that they played to the jury at trial of Don, because he's really into science, building a rocket with their son in the garden. It's literally a few weeks before they die. And they're setting it alight, and Gail's in the background. She's like, "Oh, it's lit, but it's not moving." And it's it's just this adorable little home video of these grandparents who had such a close relationship with their grandkids. And again, we're going to talk about motive next week. It just really boggles the mind at why someone would tear grandparents that loving and that involved away from grandkids who also clearly adored them.
Gail spent her retirement years volunteering, teaching asylum seekers to speak English. 69-year-old Ian and 66-year-old Heather also had 4 children, and as a couple were very involved in the community. Ian was the pastor, like I said, and Heather helped out at a nearby school as a teaching assistant. Ian said that he'd only really considered Erin to be an acquaintance, but he was happy to be invited over to her house for lunch, nevertheless.
Now let's take a look at the relationship between Simon and Erin themselves. The pair first met in the early 2000s when they both worked at the Monash Council. Erin actually has a degree in business and accounting and is actually a qualified air traffic controller. So look, she's not a stupid person.
No, she's not.
She's not a stupid person. You can't be an air traffic controller and be quite as stupid as she seems when she's giving that
It's really difficult to pass the exams.
Absolutely.
Very mathsy.
She's a very intelligent woman, which again begs a lot of questions as to why this case kind of unfolded in the way that it did.
Well, I guess...
I think it's arrogance. It's hubris.
Yes, I think it's too much of a good thing, but equally, if someone has to tell you that they're funny, they're not. Smart people don't say that they're smart.
They just are.
They just are.
But Erin was. She just was smart also. But I think she was so arrogant that she was smarter than everybody that I think she made a lot of mistakes that were her undoing. But again, we're jumping ahead. So at the time she met Simon, she wasn't actually working as an air traffic controller for Monash Council. She was working in animal management, which seems odd that that's what she was doing, but that's what she was doing. And Simon was a civil engineer.
They probably do have to manage a lot of animals in Australia, otherwise they get the bullfrog like in The Simpsons.
Quite. I'm just like, you're a qualified air traffic controller? Why are you working in animal management? Don't know, but...
Controlling things?
She's a very controlling person. So yes, they met there and then they got married in June 2007. And I thought it was quite interesting. Like, we don't know a whole hell of a lot about Erin's family. Right? Mainly a lot of the stuff we know is about Simon's side and Erin's relationship with Gail and Don, etc. But we don't really know that much about Erin's parents. Her dad doesn't seem to be in the picture at all, really. And her mum dies, which we'll talk about in a second. But at their wedding in June 2007, both her parents are still alive and they don't come to the wedding. They were apparently on a train in Russia. That's all we hear. But I'm like, okay.
Okay, Lee Harvey Oswald, like...
You're just not going to come to your daughter's wedding? I don't know. Anyway, things between Erin and Simon looked really good at the start. They had a lot in common. They were really happy. And after the wedding, they bought a camper van and travelled all over Australia together. But soon, Erin made it clear that she was ready for a family and a more settled life. So the pair set up home in Victoria, near Simon's parents. Like I said, bit of a mystery on Erin's parents' side, but what we do know is a few years into the marriage, Erin's mum actually died. And when she did, she left a sizable inheritance to Erin of 2 million Australian dollars. And Erin was not stingy with that money. She actually lent hundreds of thousands of dollars to Simon's siblings so that they could all buy or build their own homes. And she didn't even charge interest on these loans. She simply stated that the loans be paid back in line with inflation.
And despite the breakup, Erin still got on really well with Simon's parents. She and his dad Don both shared a love of learning and bonded over sciencey stuff. And as for Gail, she'd been there for Erin when she'd had her babies, with Erin even crediting her mother-in-law for showing her the importance of just enjoying being a mother rather than worrying about every little thing. Erin had remained a fixture in the Patterson family calendar of events. And for years, things had been pretty good between her and Simon. They co-parented well, they went on family holidays together, and they regularly text each other about politics. In fact, when Erin's grandmother died, she left Erin yet more money, which she used to buy some more properties, some of which she actually put in Simon's name. Erin said that this was because she was hopeful that one day they'd find a way to bring their family back together. And that's a quote. The challenges between Erin and Simon seem to have started in 2022, when Simon filed a tax return in which he stated that he and Erin were separated. And although they were, this pissed Erin off big time, because they'd had an agreement. And this revelation would have big tax implications for her. Simon said that it had just been a misunderstanding with his accountant and that he would fix it. I am not on Erin Patterson's side. I would be furious if I'm lending your family hundreds of thousands of dollary-doos with no interest and you are making sure that I get fucked by the tax man. I would be incensed.
Yeah. So Simon says, like you said, it was a complete mistake.
I believe him.
I can fix it. But Erin tells him, don't fucking bother. She's like, don't bother. If that's how it's going to be, then fine. Bring it. I'm going after you for child support. Right? That's the situation we're in now. And she did it. And it caused a lot of confusion because basically she claims child support and then the child support agency get involved, right? They get involved and they contact Simon and they say, stop paying for everything. Stop giving Erin any money. You shouldn't be paying for school fees or medical fees for the kids individually, independently. From now on, you will make a monthly contribution of child support payments to Erin, and that will be all the money that is received, right? From that money, she will take to pay for everything. I don't fully understand, like, what was going on here. But the amount that they arrive at for Simon to pay Erin is very, very small. It basically works out at like $40 per child per month.
Right.
And they're in private schools. Right? So I don't fully get that.
No, I just don't think I know enough about how it works, to be honest.
I don't get it. And I wonder if it's because Erin on paper was so much more like wealthy than Simon. Like, is that why the amount was so small? I don't know. But Erin basically was not happy at all about the amount of money that Simon was being told to pay her. And she basically pulled the kids out of the private school that they were in without even telling Simon. Because she's contacting him saying, you need to pay for the school fees. And he's saying, they've told me not to pay for them. And maybe it was just teething problems. Maybe Simon really is that stingy. I don't know. Those were the facts of what was going on.
Erin also tried to enlist the help of Gail and Don, asking them to mediate between her and Simon to resolve the child support issues. But Simon's parents made it clear they did not want to get in the middle of anything, and I wouldn't either.
I honestly think that is the best course of action. Parents, family, even friends, people getting involved in other people's relationships, especially when it comes to money. No one's going to thank you at the end of that. I think they absolutely made the right decision.
I totally agree. And then there was Gail's 70th birthday party in October 2022. Erin initially wasn't invited, and she was raging about it. Simon explained that it had just been a communication issue and that his parents loved her, and of course they wanted her there. But Erin felt like she was being pushed out of her own family, and it hurt.
I am not going to sit here and say that a legal, financial, emotional battle with your ex is not going to be incredibly painful and difficult. Like, I understand that that would be true.
I'm not going to do a murder about it, though.
Quite. But school fees, child support, school fees, child support, who's invited to what party, it's all honestly a bit fucking boring. But we have to talk about it because this is really the only animosity that seemed to exist between Erin and her ex, not ex-husband, but ex-partner Simon, and his parents. This is the only animosity that anyone can find that existed between them, at least visibly, right? And we'll go on to talk about possible motives later in this episode, particularly in next week's episode. But I have a feeling that for someone like Erin, this was enough. But again, we'll come back to it.
Erin was upset that the Pattersons, the only family that she really had pushed her aside. She'd given the siblings all this money, and now her in-laws wouldn't talk sense into their son for her, and she was getting sidelined from parties. The lack of gratitude that she no doubt felt was owed to her boiled her blood. There is more to unpack. We'll come back to this later.
To public health investigators, the whole mushroom situation was getting increasingly more odd. No one else in the suburbs of Glen Waverley, Mount Waverley, Clayton, Oakley, or anywhere else in the whole of Australia for that matter, had got sick from death cap poisoning. No one else. So it seemed like a massive stroke of bad luck that Erin Patterson had picked up the only bag that had been out there on some nefarious Asian supermarket shelf. But if that was the case, then it also seemed like a massive stroke of luck that she was also, alongside her two kids, the only people to not get sick from eating this lunch that had killed 3 people and put a man in a coma for 2 months. And by this point, the police had tested the leftovers from Erin's bin and found death cap toxins in the mushroom paste and in the meat. Because that mushroom fucking toxin is going to seep into the meat that the duxelle is on top of, right? So their suspicions of Erin were growing because her claim was that the kids weren't sick because she scraped the mushrooms off. But it's in the meat anyway, so how are they not sick?
And so, on the 3rd of August 2023, the homicide team took over. And they did stress at the time that they were only taking over to examine the case as a complex death inquiry, as investigators on behalf of the coroner rather than under suspicion of outright murder. But let's be honest, 3 people were dead and 1 was on death's door, so there was always going to be some sort of investigation. On the 5th of August, the police carried out a search of Erin's home, and she showed them the recipe book that she had used for the beef Wellington. And you might be wondering, who makes individual beef Wellingtons? And Didn't Erin say in her text messages to Simon that she'd specifically bought very expensive ribeye steaks? Yes. Erin would tell the police that she had been unable to find a large cut of beef tenderloin, as the recipe had called for, so she decided to make her Wellingtons with 5 pieces of ribeye steak instead. Beef tenderloin isn't really that hard to come by, and it really seemed like the individual portions may have served a much more sinister purpose.
Yeah, because if you're trying to poison people, right?
And I am.
Yes. Just this welcome to our new cooking segment if you're trying to poison somebody. And you make a whole beef Wellington, as is traditional. You have no control over how much duxelle falls into every bit. Much like if you maybe like to make yourself a little space brownie. The inherent problem is always you don't know how much is going to end up in every fucking slice. So one person having a great time, another person being sick, another person having a fucking boring old evening. You just don't know.
Or going to lie down like your mum.
Right. This I'm fucking killer. Jesus Christ. Oof. Phew. So yeah, I think that was Erin's thinking. If I make a whole Wellington, I have no control over how much duxelle ends up in each bit, and therefore what dosage of the death cap toxin, death cap mushrooms, everybody gets. Whereas if I make individual portions, I know exactly how much duxelle is in each portion.
Yeah.
That is what I believe the reasoning. Well, also probably because it's a lot fucking easier. Because essentially it's just a piece of steak with some duxelle on, wrapped in pastry. That's why I said they're more like pasties rather than like a proper beef Wellington, which is obviously incredibly difficult to make. Although I've never made one. But I do believe you said it would be your dinner party dish once upon a time.
Depends
how much you like the people.
Well, if I could do it well, then yes, it would be, because it's like to show off.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
However, I really disagree with serving anybody steak in a dinner party setting because everybody likes it done so differently. And I have very strong opinions on how it should be done.
Sure.
And if anyone
crosses that, you will murder them.
Wanted a well-done steak in my house, I would have to get them to leave. I just think it's sinful.
Best just left out of the equation then, I think.
That is my point.
Look.
Anything over a medium rare, I'm judging you. I am.
Look, I don't eat beef, so I find that hard to wrap my head around, but I am also a food snob, so I can get on board with the
also,
feelings.
I worked at Flatiron for 2 years.
Sure.
I know about meat, beef. Said both. But it's very hot in here.
It is incredible.
I am Ace Ventura inside the rhino's butt. That is how I feel. Warm.
Oh my God. Okay. So yes, she's making these pasties. She's filling them with duxelle. We'll talk about this more, but I think right now, let's talk about what the police found on a tablet. So electronic tablet that they found in Erin's house.
Okay.
They found on there several pictures of a set of kitchen scales that looked very much like the ones that Erin owned.
Mm-hmm.
And in these pictures, it looked like some dried mushrooms were being weighed on them.
Mm-hmm.
In a kitchen that looked a lot like Erin's kitchen. Right? Erin's scales were later tested and, bingo, found to have traces of death cap toxins on. Again, remember, I just want to be fair, I want to be clear. This doesn't prove that Erin knew what she was using were dried death caps. All it proves is dried death caps, or death caps full stop, were in her kitchen. And we already know that. We know that they were in the food because by this point, the hospital has already tested the victims. And while no death cap toxins were found in Gail and Heather's body, they were found in Ian and Don's. And they just think it's because people metabolize toxins differently. And also Gail and Heather weren't tested until like a few days later. And it can leave your body quite quickly. So they already know death cap toxins is what killed them. So just to be fair to Erin, it didn't prove that she knew what she was using were dried death caps. Because at this point, remember, she's still claiming that she got them from an Asian supermarket. So she can just be an innocent idiot who was using these mushrooms. The question for me is, and maybe Hannah, you can help us out with this, why the fuck would one need to weigh out mushrooms for a duxelle? Why are you bothering to weigh them out? It's just duxelle, as far as I know, is just a mushroom pate situation.
You hate following instructions, though.
I do hate following instructions.
So
I don't follow recipes.
if I can conceive of a world in which I would weigh the mushrooms.
Okay. Well, I have written this next bit as if I can't conceive of that world.
That's why I'm here.
Because I was just like, why on earth would you need to be so specific about the mushroom-iness of this paste? I would just be like, you make the paste, you taste the paste. Oh, it needs a bit more mushroom. Needs a bit more salt.
That's how you cook. Lots of people don't.
Okay, well, that's what I thought. And Erin's claim was similarly to what Hannah, you are saying. She said that she changed the recipe, right? Because the recipe calls for 1 log. She's saying I had to make 6 individual portions. When I made 6 individual portions, I needed more pastry. I needed more mushroom because, they're all sitting as separate little parcels now. So therefore, I wanted to make sure the balance of the duxelle was right, which is why I was weighing up these dried mushrooms in order to make sure the balance remained. Okay, sure, fine. My question then would be, why is she using these old dried up mushrooms from her pantry, the ones that she allegedly, according to her, had rejected for a carbonara months before because they smell too strong? Why would you now use them just because you needed extra mushrooms, especially based on what you're about to tell us next, Hannah?
And I'm going to. When the police got access to Erin's bank statements, the story of her desperately needing some extra mushrooms made even less sense. Her bank statement showed that Erin had bought 1.2 kilos of mushrooms from a local supermarket on the 23rd of July, just a few days before the lunch. So how did she not have enough mushrooms to make a duxelle? Even if it was for 6 individual portions, a kilo of mushrooms is a lot of mushrooms.
Yeah, because that's her story. Her story is, well, I just didn't have enough mushrooms. I needed more mushrooms. Now I'm making individual portions. So I had to delve into my pantry and dig out these old dried up mushrooms that I'd bought months before from an Asian supermarket. And then I weighed them on some scales and then I put them in the duxelle. But you bought 1.2 kilos literally 2-3 days before?
Well, according to Erin, she had eaten 1.2 kilos of mushrooms herself. I like a mushroom.
In 2 days.
I don't know if I'm eating them out of the bag like crisps. What's going on there?
That is a lot of mushroom. I know we're nitpicking. I know it might seem like little small things that we're picking up on, but this is the story that Erin tells, right? So we have to follow up on it. So coming back to the tablet that police found. On there, they also found pictures of a dehydrator, like a vegetable dehydrator, a food dehydrator, with mushrooms being dried. When asked, this just gets better and better and worse for Erin, because the police ask her, have you ever owned a dehydrator?
I don't want this woman air traffic controlling. I'm just going to put that out into the ether.
Good, because that should never be happening. When asked this, Erin said she'd never owned a dehydrator. The police kept the pictures that they had found on her tablet to themselves, but they asked Erin about a manual for a food dehydrator that they had found in the house. And Erin told them she just liked collecting manuals.
Oh, fuck off.
I swear to God.
That's like if you were writing a character of someone who is painfully dull. That's like a thing that you would give them as like a quirk.
I almost think that's what she's trying to do, is paint herself as this ordinary, just boring mother
Why
of two.
did it work? That's why everyone's so fucking obsessed with it, because she's so boring.
Yeah, she really is. So many people are like, she's like, look at her. She couldn't have done this. And I'm like, what, just because she's fucking boring? Do you think she couldn't have murdered all these people? She fucking did. And I can say that now because she's been convicted, which is why we waited until now to do this episode, because I didn't want to say allegedly every other sentence.
Police had another little look at Erin's bank statements, and they spotted that 4 days after the death lunch, Erin had paid for a visit to the tip. I have to take my ID to go to the tip. Do you know that?
Yeah.
Fucking outrageous.
Probably because of things like this.
Well, sure.
And this tip, also, that she chose to go to, had fucking CCTV. So, yeah.
Well, if anywhere should have CCTV, it's the dump.
Yeah.
Said CCTV footage from said tip showed Erin dumping something, which turned out to be a food dehydrator, which investigators actually managed to retrieve on the 4th of August. And then they tested it, and say it with me, it was found to contain traces of death cap mushrooms.
I will play devil's advocate for a second and say it still doesn't prove that Erin knew what they were. You could say that she still put these mushrooms in her food dehydrator without knowing what they were, and then dumps a dehydrator later.
A dehydrator that she claims she's never owned.
Quite.
But here's another question. Why would the death cap mushrooms have been in the dehydrator if Erin had bought them months before as dried mushrooms? Well, according to Erin, once she finally admitted that she did indeed own and dump a food dehydrator, she actually has a series of interesting explanations for all of that, but we're going to have to save that, just like Erin did for the trial.
So sticking with our timeline, that day after the search, Erin was taken in for questioning by Constable Steve Eppingstall and Detective Senior Constable David Martin Alcade. Police said that they were trying to understand how everyone else had become so ill after the lunch, but she, Erin, and the kids hadn't. But Erin said she had been unwell, and the kids were only fine because she'd scraped off all the mushroom paste before she'd given them the meal. Even though, as we told you, when the meat was tested from the bin in Erin's house, it was found to be contaminated with the same death cap toxins. Again, Erin would have a different answer for this question at trial, but that is for next week. So, save it. She was also asked again about the dehydrator in this interview, because remember, by this point, the police have found it when they're talking to her, but they don't tell her that. And so she's asked about it again, and she once again denies owning a dehydrator because she doesn't know that they have paid a visit to the tip. When she's shown the pictures of the dehydrator from her tablet, Erin said that perhaps she'd owned one a long time ago. So during this interview, Erin also clearly stated when questioned that she had never foraged for mushrooms. So this time no one's saying, have you been mushrooming? They ask her if she's been foraging and she says no.
Another thing that detectives queried was the reason for the lunch in the first place.
Because, Erin says it was perfectly ordinary for them all to get together for lunch like that. Simon was like, no, it wasn't. No, it wasn't. And like we told you, Ian and Heather, who are Simon's aunt and uncle, didn't really know Erin that well. So they were invited. Why were they invited? Don and Gail, okay, maybe, but this group lunch, Simon is like, that was weird. And it was strange that she was doing it. But she insists that it was perfectly normal.
Police had found screenshots on Erin's devices of the symptoms of ovarian cancer, and Don had told his son Simon, before he died, that Erin had told them all that she'd been diagnosed with cancer. Once Ian was out of his coma, he confirmed this as well. The police questioned Erin if she'd lied about having cancer, and was that why everybody was at lunch that day? Erin said absolutely not. She didn't have cancer and she'd never told anyone that she did. But texts between Gail and Erin tell a very different story. For example, there was a note in Gail's diary for the 26th of June that said Erin St. Vincent's arm lump. On the 28th of June at 7:30 p.m, Gail texted Erin asking how she'd got on at her appointment. And the next day, Erin replied saying it went okay, had a needle biopsy taken, have an MRI next week, then we'll know more. To which Gail said, praying for you, that's a lot to deal with, hugs and kisses. And then the next week, Gail texts again saying, how did you get on with the medical test? To which Erin replied, lot to digest, might talk to you more about it when I see you both. And the next entry in Gail's diary was lunch at Erin's with Heather and Ian.
Needle biopsy, MRI, lump. Okay, she never says the word cancer in those text messages, but it's because she says it at the lunch. And I believe that she said it at the lunch because
I do.
Don and Ian both say that she did. So Erin, I think it's very clear, was definitely telling Gail that she had some pretty major health concerns. And yet the police could find absolutely no record of any of these appointments. They could find no record of Erin having a needle biopsy or her having an MRI or any of the various appointments that she has clearly told Gail in these text messages that she had. So at first, Erin tried to explain this away by saying that she had concerns around cancer, that there was a lot of cancer in her family, and that she had had a range of appointments over the years for various different symptoms, and that she had been particularly worried about getting ovarian cancer. And that's why she had been Googling her symptoms. And that's why she had been talking to Gail about various doctor's appointments that she'd had over the years. Now, this explanation, of course, completely sidesteps the fact that she had told Gail about specific procedures that she claimed to be having on specific dates. Because Gail's got it in her diary, specific dates when she's having these procedures done. None of which were true. And as you guessed it, Erin's story about all of this, as well as many other things, would change dramatically when she got to trial. So for now, once again, let's set that aside and we will come back to it next week.
So, with suspicions mounting, on the 5th of August, the police searched Erin's home. And that day they seized a phone, a tablet, and a computer. Later, when the police checked the phone, they discovered that it had been factory reset 4 times, including 3 times after the deadly lunch.
And it gets better, because the timestamp for one of those factory resets was at 3:30 p.m. on the 5th of August, when the police were at Erin's house, searching said house. Basically, Erin had been allowed to go off into a room alone to call her lawyer while the police were there. And during that little breakaway, she had reset her phone.
But hadn't bothered to delete the photographs on her tablet.
And another reset prior to this one had been done 3 days before on the 2nd of August, but the third and final reset had been done remotely using an app after the phone had been taken into police custody on the 6th of August. So she does the reset while the police are on the 5th, they take it away and she factory resets it again while it's in their custody. Now we will come back to the whole phones situation next week. And note, I said phones, plural.
I heard you.
It's phones and Sims, plural. Because things get a lot more confusing and a hell of a lot more suspicious. But the thing about Erin that you all have to understand is that she always has an answer for everything. Even if it makes no fucking sense at all.
So let's have a little look at what the police found on the computer they seized from Erin's house. When it was analysed, investigators discovered a number of things that stood out, including searches for whether death cap mushrooms grew in Gippsland, which is the area that extends from Melbourne's eastern suburbs to New South Wales. During these searches, an article was accessed titled "Death Cap Mushroom from Melbourne, Vic, Australia," and that article included information about a sighting made by an iNaturalist user on the 18th of May 2022. Authorities then found a Google search for www.inaturalist.org/observations just after 7:23 p.m. on the 28th of May 2022. So, after the death cap article had been read, the website cited in that article had been searched for using Bing. I hate that. Using Bing on a Chrome browser.
I just thought that was just too good. She's hilarious. She's hilarious. She's on Google Chrome and she searches for Bing to then use Bing to search for this website. It's hilarious.
Prison, she should get life just for that. Anyway, the website, iNaturalist, is like a public science forum kind of, and on the page that had been visited on that computer that was taken from Erin's house, there was quite a lot of discussion about mushrooms, death caps in particular.
After that, the police could also see, from May 2022 onwards, the iNaturalist website had been visited multiple times using Erin's computer. And on that forum, there was an entry by a woman named Christine Mackenzie. Christine had written on iNaturalist that as a retired poison specialist, she was a bit worried about something she had found. On the 18th of April 2023, Christine posted on iNaturalist saying that she had been out for a walk with her husband and her grandson in Loch, which is about 28 kilometres from Leongatha. Christine said that on this walk, she had spotted some death cap mushrooms growing under an oak tree. And look, like I said, Christine is a retired poison specialist and she knew exactly how dangerous these mushrooms were. So she took some photos of these mushrooms and then she collected all the ones that she could find in a dog poo bag and threw them away. Very responsible, very safe, top work, Christine. Now, in her post about this on iNaturalist, Christine even geotagged the location in Loch where she had found these mushrooms. And the reason for doing this was so that other users, other people could keep an eye out for any sort of regrowth in that area and also destroy any of these mushrooms if they happen to come across them, right? So it's all very with good reason that Christine is doing this. And then in May 2023, another user, someone who calls themselves Funky Tom, who is actually Dr. Tom May, who's a principal fungi research scientist at the Royal Botanical Gardens in Melbourne, also posted about death caps on the iNaturalist website. Dr. Tom said that he had spotted some near Outram, less than 20 kilometres from Leongatha.
Certainly looked quite a lot like Erin Patterson was fascinated by these deadly mushrooms and was possibly trying quite hard to get her hands on some. Because death caps can't be cultivated, they only grow in the wild, and they only do that during very specific months of the year. We'll come back to that. And crucially, we will also tell you about the cell tower phone data next week when we get into the trial.
And yeah, I think this combination of the iNaturalist forum posts plus the cell phone data was kind of like a real smoking gun for me. I appreciate there are some issues with it and we'll talk about it next week when we get to the trial. And I do also want to say, just to be fair and clear, that they couldn't prove that Erin had looked at or seen Dr. Tom May or Christine Mackenzie's posts. They couldn't prove, because she didn't interact.
I remember you
them.
saying.
They couldn't prove that she had seen them. But she had been on that website where those posts were made.
Mm-hmm.
Like I said, come back to the cell phone tower data next week, but I do want to be fair. So let's wrap this episode up with the arrest. After finding all of this, the police felt pretty certain that Erin had indeed foraged for wild mushrooms and then lied about this mythical Asian supermarket and basically sent them on a bit of a wild goose chase. Her story about the suburb in which she had bought them from kept changing. The description of the bag of the mushrooms wasn't consistent with anything the public health had found. It just didn't seem to add up. And also add in the fact that nobody else got sick and all the other samples that they had tested of mushrooms from all of these different shops, they hadn't found any other death caps. It just seemed highly unlikely that somebody was doing this nefariously. They also discovered, and this is quite interesting, but sort of leads nowhere, that in 2022, Simon Patterson had actually suffered from a perplexing stomach illness. So the year before the deadly lunch in 2023. In May 2022, Simon had actually been so sick that he had been hospitalised, and they never discovered what had been making him sick. And Erin had reluctantly agreed to nurse him back to health for 3 weeks after he was released from hospital. And so, on the 2nd of November 2023, 3 months after that deadly lunch, Erin was arrested and charged with 3 counts of murder and 5 counts of attempted murder. And that is obviously 1 count of attempted murder against Ian Wilkinson and 4 against Simon Patterson. So 1 from the lunch, because remember, she wanted him to be there. She'd cooked him a meal, and 3 from 2022. So join us next week, where we will be picking up with the second and final part of our series into the case of Erin Patterson. And next week we'll be getting into the psychology of a poisoner. We'll be talking about motivations that Erin may have had, and also, of course, all the drama of that very hotly anticipated trial. So we'll see you then.
Is Funky Tom there?
Yeah.
Okay, great.
He is great. He is fantastic. So yeah, we'll talk about all that next week. So yes, and be sure to go and listen to Flesh and Code, which is out now wherever you listen to your podcasts.
Or else.
Yeah, or else. We'll feed you a mushroom pasty. See you then. Bye.
Bye.